The call came at 7:22 inches the morning on a Saturday. I was in the garage, sorting through boxes of old tools I had been meaning to sell for 2 years. Retirement gives you plenty of time to postpone things. My phone was sitting on the workbench, and when it buzzed, I figured it was my neighbor asking about the riding mower I promised to lend him. I picked it up without looking at the screen. "Mr. Grimes, this is Dr. Anita Parrish at Erlanger Health System in Chattanooga. I'm calling about your son, Danny." I set down the wrench in my hand. "My son? There's been an accident. A truck ran a red light on Highway 153 early this morning. Your son's vehicle took the impact on the driver's side. He's out of surgery, but his condition is serious. We need to discuss his treatment options." I was in my truck before she finished the sentence. "My name is Walter Grimes. I am 64 years old. I spent 31 years as a licensed electrician in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Built a small contracting business from nothing, retired 3 years ago when my knees made the work more punishment than pleasure. I live alone in a house I built with my own hands outside Soddy Daisy, about 20 minutes north of the city. I have a vegetable garden that gets more attention than it deserves, and a dog named Hector who thinks he is in charge of the property. I have one son. Danny is 37. He works as a civil engineer for Hamilton County. Coaches his daughter's soccer team on weekends, makes his own barbecue sauce from a recipe he swears he invented himself, but which I recognized immediately as the one my mother used to make. He has his mother's eyes and my stubborn streak, and a laugh that fills up whatever room he is in. He is, without question, the best thing that ever happened to me. I raised him mostly alone. His mother, Elaine, left when Danny was 12. She said she needed to find herself. She found herself in Atlanta with a real estate developer named Craig, and as far as I know, she has been finding herself there ever since. I did not fight the divorce. I fought for Danny, and I got him, because he was old enough to tell the judge what he wanted, and what he wanted was to stay in Chattanooga with me. Elaine agreed without much argument. I have always tried not to read too much into that. Danny grew up fine. Better than fine. He graduated from UTC with honors, married a woman named Priya who is smarter than both of us put together, and 3 years ago they gave me a granddaughter named June, who has apparently decided that her primary purpose in life is to wrap me completely around her finger. She is succeeding. The drive to Erlanger took 23 minutes. I know because I kept checking the clock, trying to calculate whether I was driving fast enough. The emergency department was crowded for a Saturday morning. I gave Danny's name at the front desk and was taken to a consultation room where Dr. Parrish met me. She was straightforward and kind, the way good doctors are when the news is not good. The accident had damaged Danny's left kidney beyond repair. His right kidney had taken blunt trauma and was functioning at reduced capacity. He had lost significant blood. The surgical team had stabilized him, but his kidney function was a serious concern going forward. If his remaining kidney did not recover, he would need dialysis and eventually a transplant. "I want to be tested," I said before she finished. "Mr. Grimes, we appreciate that. But let's see how the next 48 hours go before we discuss donation." "Test me now," I said. "Whatever he needs, I want to be ready. I am 64 years old and I have one kidney I am not using for anything important. Test me." She looked at me for a moment, then nodded. I saw Danny that afternoon. He was heavily sedated, tubes running in and out of him, the machines beside his bed making steady sounds that I told myself were reassuring. Priya was there, red-eyed and exhausted, holding his hand. Little June was with Priya's mother, which was the right call. 6-year-olds do not need to see their fathers like this. Priya stood when I came in, and we held on to each other for a while without saying anything. There was nothing to say. Her father-in-law was 64 years old, and her husband was 37, and he was lying in a hospital bed because someone had run a red light at 6 in the morning. None of it made any sense. He looked so small in that bed. Danny is 6'1", 210 pounds, a man who fills a door frame. In that hospital bed, under those fluorescent lights, he looked like the 12-year-old boy I used to watch sleep when I came home late from job sites and checked on him before going to bed myself. "Hey, buddy," I said quietly. "I'm here. "Your old man's here." He did not wake up, but I stayed. The compatibility testing happened over the following 2 days. Blood draws, tissue typing, kidney function evaluation, a full medical history review. The nephrologist, a precise man named Dr. Ferris, who wore bow ties and spoke in careful, measured sentences, explained everything clearly. Living donation was a serious commitment. The process was thorough. The evaluation could take weeks. "I understand," I said. "Just tell me if I'm a match. We'll know more after the full workup." I went home each night and came back each morning. I slept badly and ate worse, and spent too many hours sitting in hospital chairs thinking about all the years that had passed and all the ones I was not ready to lose. On the 4th day, Dr. Ferris asked me to come to his office. There was another doctor with him, a woman I had not met, introduced as Dr. Sandra Whitfield, the department's director of transplant medicine. They both had the careful faces that doctors use when they are about to say something difficult. "Please sit down, Mr. Grimes," I said. "We've completed your compatibility evaluation." Dr. Ferris folded his hands on his desk. "Your kidney function is excellent for your age. You are in good health overall, and under normal circumstances you would be an excellent candidate for living donation." I heard the word normal and felt the bottom of something give way. However, we encountered an anomaly during the blood typing and tissue matching process. We ran the panel 3 times before bringing this to you. "What kind of anomaly?" Dr. Whitfield leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Grimes, the genetic markers we use in transplant compatibility also provide information about biological relationships between donor and recipient. The results of your testing indicate that you and Danny do not share a biological parent-child relationship." The room did not spin. It just went very still. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means the data indicates that Danny is not your biological son." I looked at the two of them. I looked at the wall behind them. I looked at my own hands. "That's not possible," I said. "I was in the delivery room." I cut the cord. "We understand this is unexpected," Dr. Ferris said. "The science is not infallible, but we ran the panel 3 times with 2 separate samples. The results are consistent. Are you telling me that my son, the boy I raised for 37 years, is not mine?" "We're telling you what the genetic data shows, Doctor." Whitfield's voice was gentle. "We recognize this is an enormous thing to hear. We're not suggesting anything about your relationship with Danny. We're simply required to be transparent about the findings because they affect the medical assessment." I sat in that chair for a long time. They let me. Eventually, I asked, "Can I still donate?" As a non-biologically related donor, you would go through additional evaluation. But yes, living donation between non-relatives is performed regularly. It is entirely possible. I nodded. "Keep testing me," I said. "Whatever else this is, keep testing me." I drove to the hospital parking garage and sat in my truck for 45 minutes. Elaine. I had not spoken to Elaine in 2 years. We were not enemies, exactly. We were 2 people who had run out of things to say to each other sometime around Danny's 15th birthday and had simply kept going through the motions until the day she stopped. After the divorce, we communicated about Danny when Danny required it, which grew less frequent as he grew older. The last time I had seen her was at Danny and Priya's wedding, 8 years ago. She sat on the left side of the church. I sat on the right. I still had her number. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Walter? Is Danny? He's stable. I need to ask you something." A pause. "Of course. What is it?" "I was tested to donate a kidney. They ran a full genetic panel. The results say Danny is not my biological son." Long silence. "Elaine." Her voice when it came back was different, smaller. "I was afraid of this." "You were afraid of this? How long have you been afraid of this?" "Walter, I'm sorry." "How long, Elaine?" "Since he was born." The words landed like something physical. I pressed my palm flat against the steering wheel. "There was someone," she said, "before Danny was born. A conference in Nashville. I had too much to drink. It was one time. One stupid, terrible time. And I never told you because I was terrified, and I told myself it didn't matter, that Danny was yours, that everything was fine. But you were not sure. No. I was not sure. Who is he? His name was Robert Tasker. He worked for a firm in Nashville. I have not spoken to him since. I don't even know if he's still. Find out. I disconnected the call. I want to tell you that I sat in that truck and fell apart. That would have been reasonable. 37 years of my life had just been reframed in a sentence. The boy I had coached and scolded and worried over and driven to school and waited up for and walked down the aisle to give away at his wedding, none of that had been built on the foundation I thought it was. I had been a father to someone else's son for 37 years and never known it. But here's the thing about being 64 years old. You have enough scar tissue by then to stay upright when you should fall down. The grief was there, building behind my sternum, real and heavy and patient. But Danny was in a hospital bed 4 floors above me, and Priya was exhausted, and little June needed her father to get better. The grief could wait. I went back inside. I did not tell Priya. Not yet. She had enough to carry. I sat with Danny through the afternoon and into the evening, talking to him even though he was mostly unconscious, telling him about Hector and the vegetable garden and the way the dogwood trees had come in this spring, filling the silence with the ordinary details of a life we had built together. A life that was still ours, regardless of what any genetic panel said. He opened his eyes briefly around 7 in the evening. Dad. His voice was barely audible, rough from the intubation. Hey, buddy. I'm here. His hand moved slightly toward mine. I took it. Don't go. I'm not going anywhere, I said. I promise. He slept again. I stayed until the nurses told me visiting hours were over. Elaine called me back the following morning. Robert Tasker was alive. He was 61 years old, living in Franklin, Tennessee, still working in finance. He was married, had 3 grown children. She had reached him through an old professional network contact. Does he know about Danny? No. I never told him. You're going to have to tell him now. I know. Call him today. Tell him his son is in a hospital in Chattanooga and might need a kidney. Tell him everything. She was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do, Walter? I'm going to see my son, I said. Same as I've done every day for 37 years. Robert Tasker arrived 2 days later. I was not there when he came. Priya called me, her voice careful and confused, saying that a man had arrived claiming to be related to Danny and that the doctors were involved and could I please come. I drove to the hospital knowing what I would find and hating that I had to walk into it. Robert Tasker was in the consultation room with Dr. Ferris and Dr. Whitfield. He was a tall man, silver-haired, with the polished look of someone who had spent his career in boardrooms. When I walked in, he stood and extended his hand with the practiced confidence of a man who had never been in a room he did not know how to manage. Mr. Grimes, Robert Tasker, I appreciate you reaching out. I did not shake his hand. Dr. Ferris explained the situation with the precision of someone who had done difficult conversations many times. Robert Tasker listened with his hands folded on the table, nodding at appropriate intervals. When Dr. Ferris finished, Robert Tasker said that he was sorry to hear about Danny's condition and that he was willing to be tested. He was tested. The results came back within 48 hours. Robert Tasker was Danny's biological father. His tissue compatibility was acceptable, not perfect, but workable. Danny's remaining kidney had partially recovered, buying time, but the transplant conversation remained very much on the table. And then Robert Tasker asked to speak with me privately. We sat in the small family waiting room at the end of the hall. He had the look of a man composing himself before saying something he had rehearsed. Mr. Grimes, I want you to understand that I had no knowledge of any of this. When Elaine contacted me, it was the first I had heard of it. I have a family in Franklin. My wife, my children, they don't know about any of this. I waited. I want to do the right thing here. I'm willing to be tested further to see if I can help Danny, but I need you to understand that my involvement has to be limited. This is an incredibly complicated situation, and I have people at home who... Is he your son? Robert Tasker stopped. Based on what the doctors told you, is Danny your biological son? Yes. Then I don't think the word complicated should be in your vocabulary right now. He straightened slightly. You've had time to process this. I've had 48 hours. I've had 37 years of showing up, I said. You've had 48 hours of being asked to start. Those are two very different problems. He looked at me and said nothing. I stood up. The doctors will contact you. Whatever you decide, that's between you and your conscience. But I want you to know something, Robert. Whether you help Danny or not, whether you choose to be in his life or not, he already has a father. He's had one the whole time. That is not something you can walk in here and change. I left the room before he could respond. Danny was moved out of intensive care on day 9. His right kidney was stabilizing, which the doctors called promising. Doctor, Ferris said the transplant question was not off the table but was less immediately urgent. Danny was awake more consistently now, aware enough to be frustrated by the restrictions and embarrassed by how many people were hovering over him, which Priya said was a good sign. I had not told him what I knew. I was not sure how to. There is no preparation for that conversation, no right way to sit down with your son and tell him that the man who raised him was not the man who made him. I turned it over in my mind every night, driving home from the hospital, every morning with coffee in the kitchen while Hector watched me from his bed in the corner. He told me first. It was the 11th day. Priya had gone to pick up June from her mother's and bring her to see Danny for the first time since the accident. I was sitting in the chair beside his bed. He was awake, clearer-eyed than he had been, the color returning to his face slowly. "Dad," he said. Something in his voice made me put down the magazine I was pretending to read. The doctors told me about the compatibility test, about the genetic panel. I set the magazine on the side table. They explained why the results were what they were. He looked at the ceiling for a moment. They were very professional about it, very careful. "Danny, I already knew, Dad." The room was completely quiet. "I found out 12 years ago." He turned his head to look at me. "I was going through some old boxes at Mom's house after she moved to Atlanta, looking for my birth certificate for the passport application, remember? I found a letter. She had written it and never sent it. It was to a man she called Robert. It said things that didn't make sense at first, and then they made sense. I could not speak. I had a private test done, sent away for one of those mail-in kits." He exhaled slowly. The results confirmed it. 12 years. 12 years, he said. His voice was even. "I've known for 12 years, and I decided before the results even came back that it didn't matter. Because by the time I was sitting in that apartment waiting for that envelope, I had already spent 25 years being your son. You taught me how to wire a circuit and change a tire and treat a woman with respect. You drove 4 hours round trip every weekend when I was at UTC just to have dinner with me. You sat with me at the kitchen table the night Priya's first pregnancy ended in a miscarriage, and you didn't say a single thing except that you were sorry and that you loved me." He stopped. Who was going to tell me that none of that counted? I pressed my hand over my eyes, felt the burn behind them. "You could have told me," I finally said. "What would that have done except hurt you?" He shook his head carefully, mindful of the IV in his arm. "You deserved better than that. You gave me everything, and you never once made me feel like I owed you for it. I wasn't going to repay that by tearing your world apart over biology. Danny, I'm sorry I kept it from you. I've thought about whether that was the right call 100 times. But every time I thought about telling you, I thought about your face, and I couldn't do it." I sat there for a long time. Outside in the hallway, the hospital went about its business. Machines beeped. Someone laughed. The ordinary sounds of a place where extraordinary things happen to ordinary people every day. "Does Priya know?" He nodded. I told her when we got serious. Before I proposed, she said it didn't change anything. "Smart woman. The smartest," he said. There was the hint of a smile. "And Robert Tasker?" His face went carefully neutral. "The doctors mentioned him. Said he came to be tested. I don't need to meet him, Dad. I don't want to. He was not there. You were there." "It's not quite that simple," I said. Why not? Because you might need a kidney someday. Because your daughter might need medical history information that I can't give her. Because he is a part of your biology, whether either of you wants that to be true or not. Danny was quiet for a moment. Is he a decent man? I don't know him well enough to say. He was scared. Worried about his family and Franklin. Fair enough. He came, though. When Elaine called, he came. Whatever else he is, he got in a car and drove to Chattanooga. Danny looked at the ceiling again. Maybe someday, he said finally. Not now. But maybe someday I'll be ready to know who he is. He looked back at me. But you're my father. Today and every day after. That is not a negotiation. I nodded. I did not trust myself to say anything. The door opened and June came in at full speed, her dark hair flying, wearing a hospital visitor sticker on her shirt like a badge of honor. She stopped at the edge of the bed with wide eyes. Daddy, you have so many tubes. I do, Danny said, his face completely transformed. Come here, Junebug. She climbed up carefully, guided by Priya's hands, and settled herself against her father's side with the absolute certainty of someone who has never questioned where she belongs. I watched them, the three of them, and I thought about what my son had carried alone for 12 years to protect me. Thought about the weight of that. The love that has to be inside a person to make that choice. Robert Tasker's transplant evaluation was completed the following week. Danny's kidney continued to recover, and Dr. Ferris ultimately determined that transplant surgery was not necessary at that time. Robert Tasker returned to Franklin. He sent a card to the hospital, addressed to Danny with a phone number and a brief note that said he was available if Danny ever wanted to make contact. Danny read it once, put it in his nightstand drawer, and did not mention it again. I am not certain what will come of that. I have stopped trying to be certain about things I cannot control. The truth about Danny's biological parentage did not stay quiet, because these things rarely do. Priya's mother knew the doctors had been testing for compatibility issues. My neighbor had seen Robert Tasker's car in the hospital parking lot when he came to visit me one afternoon to ask about the riding mower. Small cities run on information the way machines run on fuel. I did not volunteer anything and did not deny anything when people asked. Elaine, to her credit, called several people herself and told them the truth before they could hear it sideways. I do not know what it cost her to do that. I give her credit for doing it anyway. The custody and legal questions that some people brought up about financial claims and paternity documents and what recourse I might have, I discussed with an attorney friend of mine over coffee one afternoon. He said I had potential claims. I said I would think about it. I've been thinking about it for several months now, and I keep arriving at the same answer. The money Elaine and I spent, the years I invested, the choices I made them for Danny. They produced Danny. I would make every one of those choices again tomorrow. Suing Elaine for what she cost me feels like billing myself for something I chose to buy. Danny was discharged after 3 weeks. He came home to the house he and Priya rent in Red Bank, thinner and slower than before, but himself in every way that matters. June made him a get-well card that she decorated with approximately 40 stickers and presented to him with the gravity of someone bestowing an award. I drove over every Sunday for 2 months while he recovered. We watched football and I brought food, and sometimes we just sat on the back porch and said very little, which is something we have always been good at together. The comfortable silences of people who know each other well. One Sunday in October, he brought out 2 bottles of beer and handed me one, and we sat watching the last of the afternoon sun come through the trees in his backyard. I used to watch you sleep, I told him. When you were a kid, I'd come home late from a job and check on you before I went to bed. You never knew. He looked at me. I used to stand in the doorway and think about how strange it was that this person existed, that I had anything to do with making this person exist. He smiled slightly. Turns out I had less to do with it than I thought. Dead. But here's the thing, I said. I stood in that doorway for years. That part was real. Every time I stood there, that was real. He was quiet for a moment. He looked at the trees. You know what I remember from when I was a kid? he said. Not the big stuff. Not vacations or birthdays. I remember you fixing my bike in the driveway. I remember you making eggs on Saturday mornings. I remember you in the bleachers at every single game I ever played, even the bad ones, even the cold ones in November when nobody else's dad showed up. He took a drink of his beer. That's what I remember. I nodded. That's what June is going to remember, too. He glanced at me sideways. She already asks for Grandpa Walter more than she asks for anyone else. Priya is slightly offended. I laughed. First time I had laughed properly in weeks. We sat there until the sun was gone and Priya called from inside that dinner was ready. Danny got up slowly, carefully, the way men do when their bodies are still remembering what happened to them. He put his hand briefly on my shoulder as he passed. Inside, June had set the table and placed a centerpiece of flowers she had picked from the backyard, most of which were technically weeds. Priya was carrying plates from the kitchen and told me to sit down and not offer to help, which I ignored. It was an ordinary evening. The most ordinary thing in the world. 4 people around a table with food and noise and a 6-year-old who wanted to tell everyone about something her friend said at school that she found hilarious and that none of the adults quite understood. I have thought a great deal, since that night in the parking garage when the world shifted under me, about what exactly I lost. When I am honest with myself, the answer is almost nothing. I lost a version of a story I had been telling myself for 37 years. A story about biology and continuity, and what it means to pass something of yourself into the future. That story was not true, but the life underneath it was. Danny is my son. He was my son when Elaine brought him home from the hospital and I held him for the first time, terrified and overwhelmed in the way new fathers are. He was my son during the years when Elaine was gone, and it was the 2 of us figuring out how to be a family of 2. He was my son when he graduated, and when he married Priya, and when he called me at 2 in the morning after June was born, his voice full of something that sounded like wonder, and said, "Dad, I understand now. I get it." He has known the truth for 12 years, and he has called me every week during those 12 years without missing a single one. That is not obligation. That is not habit. That is a choice, made over and over again by a man who understood something important about what makes a father. Robert Tasker provided the biology. I provided everything else. I know which one Danny needed more. The vegetable garden is doing well this year, better than last year. I have more tomatoes than I know what to do with, which means Priya has been getting bags of them every Sunday, which means June has decided she loves tomatoes, which means I have been specifically asked to plant more next spring. I'm taking this request very seriously. Hector has appointed himself guardian of the garden and takes this responsibility more personally than anything else in his life. I am 64 years old and I am, by any measure I know how to apply, a lucky man. Blood does not make a family. I know that now in a way I did not know it before, though I suspect I always understood it at some level, in the part of yourself that knows things before the rest of you catches up. What makes a family is simpler and harder than biology. It is the decision, made and remade every day, to show up, to stay. To put someone else's life at the center of yours and leave it there. I made that decision 37 years ago in a delivery room in Chattanooga, Tennessee. My son made it 12 years ago in an apartment with a mail-in envelope in his hands. Some decisions are made once. The ones that matter are made every day forever. Danny called this morning, a Tuesday. Nothing special about it, just to talk. We discussed the upcoming football season and a problem he is having with a contractor on a county project and whether June is old enough to start learning to fish, which I have been campaigning for since she was 4. He said maybe next summer. I said, why not this summer? He said we would see, which in Danny's vocabulary means yes if I am patient. We talked for 45 minutes about nothing in particular. Before he hung up, he said, "Hey, Dad." "Yeah?" "I just wanted to say," he paused. "Nothing, actually, just hey." "Hey," I said back. We said goodbye, and I sat for a while with the phone in my hand, listening to the ordinary quiet of my house, And I thought about how a man can have everything taken from him that he thought he had and end up somehow with more than he started with. So, I want to ask you something. Not about genetics or biology or legal definitions. Just this. Who showed up for you? Who stood in the doorway when you were asleep and chose you every single time without needing anything in return? If this story brought someone to mind, maybe tell them. Maybe call them on a Tuesday about nothing in particular and let them hear your voice. If this reached you today, I am glad it found you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories like this one, subscribe to Buddy Chronicle. New stories here every week. Hit the notification bell so you never miss one. Thank you for staying all the way to the end. That means more than you know. I will see you in the next one.